Councillor Oliver is on his way. We'll start.
Start it, Chair.
Thank you very much. So welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. We are dispensing with microphones today, so we need to try to project our voices, hopefully, make sure we're properly heard. And that particularly applies to me, so we'll do our best to keep our voices up. So the live stream has been started. Fire and emergency evacuation for those present in the room. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point of the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings, provided it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. And we have a number of people in attendance as virtual participants. Can I request they use the raise hand function within the system if they wish to participate and contribute themselves, introduce themselves when they are called upon. Peter, welcome remotely. We'll do our best to get through your sections of the meeting is to enable you to leave when you wish to.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Robert Highfield and Councillor Oliver is on his way. Name substitutes, there are no substitutes. Declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? No, thank you. Minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on 27th of September are included in the papers. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record? Thank you. All show their hands. Thank you very much. There are no questions from members of the public and no questions from councillors. So we move straight on, Peter, to the main item of this meeting, which I'm delighted to say we're in a few moments we're going to approve the accounts, hopefully. In your work, Peter, I guess involves heading the audit and drawing to this committee's attention on particularly significant matters, but I will hand over to Rachel Hart, if I may, for an introduction to this item. Thank you, Rachel. And congratulations for getting to where we have, so.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're just going to hand over to Pete to do the report.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. I hope you can hear me this time. So probably to start with, good, great. Firstly, just to really apologise that I can't join you in person today. I do have another audit committee down in Devon at 5 p.m. and given the issues arising at that particular audit, I do need to be there in person. So I suppose the fact that I feel that I do not need to attend in person at Herefordshire reflects positively on your arrangements in place to produce complete and accurate accounts, and I will elaborate on that shortly. You'll note that I'm joined on today's call by my colleague Ros Apley, who undertook the manager role on the opinion audits for 22-23. I will shortly present a summary position of the audit findings report within your papers, but have Ros on the call should there be any difficult questions on the detail. So straight on to what we found. I will take the audit findings report that starts on page 21 of your papers as read, but we'll bring to members' attention the key messages arising from our work. I suppose probably best to start with the accounts production. The deadline for producing draft accounts within local government for 22-23 was incredibly tight this year, and it is pleasing that the council was able to meet this earlier 31st of May 23 deadline, and that put us in a really good position to make an early start on the post-statements audits. And it is the post-statements audit where we get our assurances. For lots of audits, you can adopt a controls approach supplemented by substantive testing, which is where you're actually testing the numbers. In local government, the most efficient way is to wait till the draft accounts arrive and actually undertake substantive audit procedures on the numbers in those draft accounts. So we were able to make an early start in July in accordance with the original timeline. And as I articulated at the last meeting of this committee last month, despite excellent cooperation from the finance team at Herefordshire, we were not able to conclude our audit by that really stretched 30th of September target. And that did really reflect the challenges that we had on our side, particularly in relation to sickness. However, good progress has been made in the intervening period, and I'm pleased to report that our work is now complete. So you will see on page 26 of your pack, on the right-hand side under conclusions, that at the time of issuing this report last week, we did have a small number of outstanding areas to conclude on. Pleased to be able to report that we've now concluded all those areas, and there are no new issues arising that I need to bring to the attention of this committee. And really importantly for members of this committee, our work overall has not identified any material in the draft financial statements. And in fact, actually looking at the complexity of the financial statements, very few issues have arisen, with limited changes made to the draft accounts presented to audit. So from my perspective, the committee, and you are the committee charged with governance, can take strong assurance from this report that the council does have effective arrangements in place to produce complete, accurate and timely accounts. Now, just in terms of completeness and the main changes resulting from the audits, all changes we're required to report anything over what we call triviality. So quite low number changes have to be detailed, and these are set out in Appendix D that starts on page 51 of your papers. The biggest change was in respect of land and buildings, and this was an interesting one in that it was actually picked up by officers post-draft statements, and essentially was a difference in a land valuation between the draft valuer's report that was used by officers to produce the accounts and the final version of the valuer's report. So that difference, that error, was £4.7 million, and essentially that reduced the property, plants and equipment that appears as a very large figure at the top of your balance sheet, and there was an offsetting reduction in your unusable reserves at the bottom of the balance sheet within the revaluation reserve. But the important thing to point out here in relation to that adjustment is that it had no impact on the outturn for the year, which is an important clarification. Probably the only other area specifically that I wanted to bring to attention of members is on page 28, and this is in relation to journals, where we raised a control weakness in respect to the absence of formally documented evidence-based review, the review process that happens for some of the larger journals at the post-statement stage. You'll see in the management's response to our recommendation that there is compensating controls, but nonetheless we think this would be helpful in terms of refining arrangements to ensure that what does happen at year end is formally evidenced. And it's probably also worth just articulating about the approach that we adopt. So we do set a materiality, and any figure above that materiality within the accounts is subject to audit procedures. We also reconcile the accounts in totality back to the trial balance and the general ledger, but we've really focused our areas on what we call the significant risks, and there were four main areas in the Herefordshire accounts, as there are in most local government bodies. It's property, plant and equipment, and your investment properties, which is the big numbers at the top of your balance sheet, and the land adjustment is the biggest change there. At the bottom of the accounts, there is a large liability, a pension liability, that interestingly is reducing in size at a large number of councils. And for the first time since I can remember, in 1 or 2 councils, has actually turned from a pension liability into a pension asset, which is interesting. But nonetheless, it remains a liability in your accounts. For which the council obtains a value from its fund actuaries, Mercer, and for which we use a whole raft of experts in terms of PwC for assumptions, as well as writing to the pension fund auditors at Worcestershire for their views on arrangements. And when we identified no issues in that area. And then the final area that takes up quite a lot of our time is management overrider controls. And these are the areas where judgments and estimations are involved, but also journals. And journals are a really good way, should you wish to do so, of moving monies between capital and revenue, different accounts, or different financial years. So there's a lot of work we do around journals, and all the journals we reviewed were appropriate, but there was that one control issue that I referred to earlier. So that's probably, Chair, all I wanted to say in terms of the findings in relation to the opinion. Probably the final thing I just need to reference, which is quite unusual actually, in terms of the direction of travel, which is on page 54, which is your indicative fees for the audit for 22-23. You will see that at the planning stage, we are estimating the fees to be of the order of £164,000. However, as we progressed through the audit, we did conclude that we didn't need to utilise an independent valuation expert for property, plant and equipment and IP, so we didn't commission that work. So that resulted in a further reduction in the fee to £159,000, which you'll see when compared with the prior year is a £31,000 reduction. So it's a significant reduction year on year. It is subject to the satisfactory conclusion of our VFM work that remains in progress, but I suspect you're probably one of a few that have gone in that direction in this particular year. So hopefully that's a bit of welcome news against that increasing fees backdrop. Probably stop there, Chair, but happy to take any questions on the detail.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. You've dealt with a number of the questions I was going to raise, so short now discussion. Frank, were you going to ask something on page 45?
25, I was. Which was the under the heading national context level of borrowing. The simple question was, where does Hereford fit, please? Peter.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So sorry, I didn't quite catch that page number. Was it page 45?
25.
Sorry, 25. Bear with me. I'll go back. Right. I mean, in terms of borrowing, the issue here is that there are a small number, but an increasing number of councils that are looking to generate alternative sources of income. And you'll be aware that, you know, if you went back many years, you had the revenue support grant that was a large element of your income. That's disappeared more or less, that no longer exists. So you're reliant purely for lots of councils on council tax and business rates. And for many councils, that's not enough. And therefore, they've looked to diversify and identify new income streams. And often that involves borrowing to acquire assets that can be income generating. You know, those are what are deemed to be investment properties. You have some of those, but you don't have anywhere near as many as a lot of councils I audit. And investment properties are held purely for revenue generation and or capital appreciation. And when you do start borrowing, clearly to invest in investments and wholly owned subsidiaries and companies, etc., there is a greater inherent risk of those investments not returning in accordance with the business plan. So the guidelines around borrowing, particularly borrowing in advance of need and purely for returns that are not directly associated with service delivery, are being tightened. And what we're highlighting here is that there are a small but increasing number who arguably are, and auditors are clamping down on this, who are borrowing excessive amounts without fully considering the risks. They're absolutely considering the rewards, but not the risks. And we are urging all councils to be very careful before they embark on such activities. Herefordshire is not in that position. You inevitably have borrowing, but it's nowhere near the levels that would be of concern to me as an auditor.
Thank you.
Pete, you just kind of answered one of my other questions as well. I think compared to many councils, we're in a very strong position. We don't have all these horrible devices that some councils have gone into, borrowing huge amounts of money. But I'm slightly curious to know, the valuation I think is 43 million or something like that of commercial properties. That, I guess, Andrew, includes bits of Rotherwas that we own, and the other little industrial estates which we have around the county, and then possibly some housing. So I know the government are providing us some money for homeless and been doing so for some time. So all that presumably is within that umbrella of money.
It is, Chair. We can provide a list or we'll circulate to the committee so you can see exactly what is included in that 14 million. But as you said, it's things like the 3 Elms industrial estate just up the road and other bits and pieces we own, including Maylord's Orchard and those type of things that we own, not for delivering direct services from, but things that either support an investment return or support businesses and the economy. So a lot of the Rotherwas type units down there, that they are employment opportunities, and we have tenants who pay for those things. And we're just going through, including the process, we go through rent reviews for all of these tenancies. We're at phase 3, we've got one more phase where we're making sure that we have the most up-to-date and appropriate tenancy agreement between the council and the tenant, which outlines their obligations and our obligations. And we go through a process to get a fair rent for that. And clearly there will be different views about what a fair rent is, but we go through that process to get an appropriate market rent as well. But I'll provide the list of the investment properties.
Yeah. And some of the rents are a bit lower because of social value.
Well, exactly. So it depends on the usage. And most of the commercial rental agreements have a usage clause. Clearly, if it's been used for charitable purposes, it's very different from a commercial industry. So those are choices the council can make and does make in terms of how it wants to use those assets.
Thank you, Andrew. Any, what do you want to ask any more, Andrew, on that? No. Aubrey, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry, a little bit late.
I don't know where I got the idea started at 3 o'clock.
Yes. I think from a technical perspective, you need to declare any interest you have in items on the agenda. No, none. Thank you very much. So I think you wanted some further assurance on the pensions.
Yes. The reduction this year of 526 million in the pension liabilities seems drastic in view of the assumptions made. It's now reduced the difference between the value of the funds we have invested to 24 million, but I know the external auditors have examined this reduction and taken their own assessment of the value. I mean, this was based on a valuation at 31st of March 1922. If the assumptions on this one are correct, then surely the assumptions at the last triennial valuation, 31st of March 2019, were way out if we could have, a reduction in the liabilities on the pension fund of 524,000 since the last valuation. And my concern was that in their estimates, they included inflation at 4.7, when it was, we had inflation at 11% on October 2022, which surely is increasing our liabilities on pensions. So that was my concerns. Either the assessment of 2019 was way out, and this one is correct, or the 2022 seems to me to be out. Yeah.
Peter, I wonder whether Councillor Oliver wasn't available when you commented earlier about pensions.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. It is it's a very large figure in the accounts historically, and it is subject to a large degree of estimation. So, as set out in my presentation, it isn't a particular area of focus. And as I said, there have been some very large liabilities, net liabilities, on a number of council's balance sheets for many years. And as I said, following the latest triennial valuation that Councillor Oliver just referred to, for the first time, as long as I can remember, there are one or two councils out there that have a pension asset for the first time. And clearly, if we look at the way we get assurance as auditors over that liability, the net liability, the assets the share of the assets held by Worcestershire Pension Fund is quite easy to calculate based on the contributions and the returns and the growth. So you can quantify reasonably easily the assets that are allocated to Herefordshire, but nonetheless we do seek assurances from the pension fund auditor about the arrangements in place and get written evidence from them to support that. And that evidence also supports some of the factors that drive the liability calculation. And Councillor Oliver mentioned interest rates and inflation, but there is obviously a whole raft of different factors that impact on that, whether it be inflation, interest rates, longevity, demographic changes, etc. So what we do seek to do is we buy in expertise. We use PwC. Well, actually all the firms who audit local government pensions use PwC, and PwC will look at each of the four main actuaries, one of which is Mercer that Worcestershire use, and they will look at all the different assumptions, and they will provide a range, and we need to satisfy ourselves that the assumptions used by your actuaries in arriving at your IS 19 net pension liability calculation fall within those ranges, and they did again last year, and we've set that out in our report. But I do recognise that you only need some really small changes in some of these assumptions, particularly on inflation and interest rates, and it can make some massive differences to the liability that appears in the accounts. And that then begs the question whether a triennial valuation is sufficiently frequent to ensure the accuracy of that. But suffice to say that it has been subject to quite a lot of audit procedures to gain assurance over that £24 million net disclosure at the bottom of your balance sheet.
That's an interesting point, Peter, that perhaps they should be more regular. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. I would put a different slant on it. So this is a liability potentially for 50, 60 years ahead, and you don't want to keep on changing things every year. So the level, if the actuarial valuation comes in at a certain amount, you increase the contributions one year. The next year you drop them. You'll be bouncy all over the place. But it's very much a long-term game. And the surplus that might be generated in 1 year, we all know, can disappear the next year. And even when there's a surplus, my view would be you continue to make contributions at a reasonable level just to keep things going, to keep things ticking over. Because who knows what could happen over a 60-year period. But I'm not a pensions expert, nor am I an actuary, so or a chartered accountant. So I leave it to the experts. We're employing people like you to make those sorts of decisions. We can pontificate as politicians as much as we like. Okay, Aubrey, with that.
Yes, yeah. As I said, the difference from the valuation to annual valuation at 31st of March 2019 is significant. But providing we feel that we can live with these variations, and we have some years, then as you say, I think we can continue with the triennial valuation so long as we're aware that and maybe a large swing at the end of the next one.
Good, right. We are asked to determine whether there are any issues raised in the report which require inclusion in the committee's future work plan. I don't think so. I have noted that there's been the question about BBLP, Pete, and the contract that's been raised previous times, but at Cabinet on Thursday, there's a report relating to that issue, which hopefully will bring that nicely to a conclusion. But I can't think there's anything like that which we need to be considering in the work plan committees. That's your mind too. Good. Okay, so the recommendation is the report be considered and I guess accepted. And we have no recommendations at the moment for inclusion of any future work. Thank you. So Pete, thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
If you feel happy leaving your colleague to remain, that's fine by us. But if you'd like to stay with us, Andrew.
Well, if I could just put on record, thanks to Pete and the team, that it was a good audit from our point of view. As Pete described, there were some challenges about resourcing, but all credit to the Grant Thornton team that they've done a really good job. And as on the side of receiving the audit, it felt a good audit. So put on record that the team did a good job.
Okay. So Pete, we need to make sure we get, having got to this stage, and we'll approve the council in a moment or two. We'll make absolutely sure we get them kind of at the starting block and ready. Perhaps for do I take it from Rachel, or we might get something out by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're all ready with your pen? Fine.
The old days of using a pen are long gone, but the intention is, the only thing we do need, and I've spoken to Rachel about this already, is quite bizarrely, I'm aware that you will be signing the letter of representation dated today, but I will be, as I said, I'm off to committee down in Devon, so my intention will be to sign tomorrow morning, and all I will need is just a quick confirmation from Andrew or Rachel to indicate that nothing has happened between today and tomorrow that may impact on my opinion. And on the assumption that that is the case, it is my intention to sign and issue an unqualified opinion tomorrow morning.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, I'm told we need to have a formal vote. So all those in favour of that recommendation show thank you very much. So we then move on to the annual governance statement. And this is to seek the views of the committee as to whether the annual governance statement properly reflects the internal control environment the council is operating in and the appropriateness of actions identified to improve. Now, this is the third set. We saw a draft before.
Yeah.
This is exactly the same wording. But Rachel, I'll pass over to you for any introduction you want to.
This is the annual governance statement for 22-23. It forms part of the statutory accounts, and this annual governance statement was presented to this committee back in June as part of the draft accounts in line with the statutory deadline. It's a review of the control environment and the governance framework that the council operates in, and it's informed by the views of the head of internal audit and the annual opinion, as well as other internal audit reports, compliance reviews and statements from directors. As part of the annual governance statement, we identify areas where we could strengthen those control arrangements, and we'll bring back a report, which I think is on the agenda for this committee in I think early January, and we'll update on the progress against those actions for you ahead of preparing next year's annual governance statement. But there are no changes to the statement that we presented back in June.
Any questions from anybody? Mark.
Thank you. I had a few, but the one that stood out was on the GDPR. So, which is page 70, I believe. 78, sorry, page 78, GDPR. I was curious to know what sort of fire drill practice we have for testing the procedures, GDPR procedures. For example, if somebody was to ask for the right to be forgotten, which is, I think, Article 17 of the GDPR, have we ever practiced that? Is the council ready Does it have its plans in place or evidence that it can do that without it being too invasive and too disruptive to the operations of the council? So that was one thing. And I think the other one was about training generally, which I'm interested in. I know that the temptation is to provide more training, and we've all been on several training courses and introductions here. More training may not be equate to effective training. So really, I'd be interested in knowing that the quality of the training, there's some assurance about the quality of the training, that it is actually using techniques or methods which help people to retain what they've been trained in, because there's so many references throughout the government statement about training, and we need to have some way of knowing that the training is effective. Those are the two. Thank you.
I think we might have to provide some information outside of this committee on those points. If that's okay, we can provide you with some information as to how we determine what training is required in the format that's delivered in, and how we assess the effectiveness of that. And similarly on the GDPR issue, we'll provide some extra information for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Well, I think I'll go to the recommendation then. So the recommendation, the committee determines that the audit governance statement properly reflects the risk environment the council is operating in, and we do not identify any further actions apart from those related to the Councillor Woodall's questions. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 9, the statement of accounts. I'll pass the slate over to you, Rachel.
Thank you. This is the final version of the 22-23 accounts. This is the post-audit version of that document. It incorporates the annual governance statement, which you have just approved. Further to the accounts that were presented to this committee in June, there have been a few very minor number of amendments, and they have been detailed in Appendix D of the external audit findings report. Pete Barber from External Audit noted the adjustment in respect of land and buildings, and other than that adjustment, there have been a few presentation and disclosure amendments.
Okay, so we've seen a draft of this. There's just a couple of changes which have been pointed out to us. Does anybody have any questions, members of the committee?
Yes. Concerning the financial liabilities, listed under that is PAYE of 10.5 million. I assume we're supposed to pay PAYE on a monthly basis. So the creditor at that rate seems unduly high. Are we keeping up with our payments to the Inland Revenue?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
It's 10.5 million a month, is it, we're paying to them?
Can I ask what page you're referencing?
Where are we? Financial liabilities. It's on page 77. Short-term creditors, statutory liabilities, PAYE 10.5 million. Page 77, P 2.3.
Yes, possibly. Yeah, that will include the VAT balance outstanding at the end of March 22-23, as well as the PAYE.
Because they're both statutory liabilities, PAYE and
VAT.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, yeah, it would be helpful if it showed it. Okay, yeah. So we're not in debt.
No, we're certainly not in debt. No, we made the payment on time.
We're in debt to the customs and extra. Yeah, okay. And yeah, on that debt provision, 10 we're showing 10.9 million of bad debt provisions. Are any of these collectible, or are we proceeding with efforts to claw back that 10.9 million, or is it to be written off?
So we have debt collection procedures in place. The provision that's included in the accounts is a detailed calculation where we take each debt by category and by age, and we look at historic data in terms of collectability, and we apportion then a provision against each category of debt and the age of it to include in these accounts the amount that may not be as collectible, the amount that may be at risk.
But some of it, I mean, do you have any estimate of what may have to be written off?
Well, we take the view that if it's collectible, we'll do our very best to collect the debt.
Yeah.
So things of the tax nature, there's a process we follow.
Yeah.
But there is a formal process, and it gets reported to, I think, to this committee and to Cabinet, where we are applying the write-off rules. So we can provide you with the last update, and you'll see the next one. But in terms of we take a very firm view that we do like to collect the debts. If it takes a bit of time and we have arrangements with some of our debtors about a payment plan, it's better to have a payment plan to get some of the money rather than nothing at all.
Yeah. I think we have quite a good record, Andrew, don't you?
I think that's a fair comment, yeah.
We also have 14.7 million short-term debtors. Statutory debts, council tax and VAT. I assume that can cover sort of 6 months of the council tax collection.
Well, and we have, again, as I said before, certainly council tax and business rate, they are taxes, and we have to collect them as the billing authority. We have a number of arrangements with some of those customers who are behind.
Yeah.
And again, we prefer to have a payment plan agreed with people rather than going through the court process. So when you look at the amount of cases that we have to refer to court for collection, that is reducing year on year. But that means that we do go things. And I think it reflects the reality for a lot of our taxpayers. It's tough out there, the cost of living crisis is but it's not a sum that I'm concerned about or need to bring to your attention.
No, some of that will cover like payments over 10 months, like
exactly. Yeah, so we'll pay, or some people pay 13 instalments, a whole range.
I'm not sure that Aubrey didn't just clarify the question I was going to ask. So, when, for example, you put out the rate bills to everybody, but then you give them a year's payment plan, does the council view that as a debt that they're going to gradually collect over the 12 months, or what do you do with, you bill a company with a rate bill? Does that immediately become the total debt that's owed to the council, and then is gradually worn through the year it takes it off? Or is the monthly amount the debt that's owed to the council? How do you view that?
Well, for businesses, so we raise a business rate bill that's due on the 1st of April.
Yeah.
But we are allowed, and businesses are allowed to pay that over 12 equal instalments, or 10 instalments, or 13 instalments. So we're very accommodating for that. Whatever people, how they want to pay it, we'll accommodate that. These figures are at the end of March, so in theory, everybody should have paid all of last year's business rates and council tax. And we do have businesses that pay, early April, others do it over instalments, and we have households that pay their council tax in one go over instalments. So we accommodate all of the things, but this is at the end of March.
Yes, so by which time everything's cleared.
Is overdue.
Yeah.
Aubrey.
Yes. Yeah, we total short-term creditors 59.3 million, and the total short-term debtors 35.2 million, which is a difference of 24 million. But are we paying our suppliers and other creditors within the 30-day period, or are we extending them beyond that? I mean, it's hoped that councils and that will pay within 30 days of an invoice.
Well, and the council during the pandemic, we paid immediately. So as soon as a bill from a supplier was due, we paid that day or the next day. We recognised that has an impact on the business's cash flow. After the pandemic, we have now reset, and there was a process last financial year to reset everybody, so we pay on 30 days unless we've agreed to other terms. And we do produce performance stats that show how we perform against that. There may be one or two that don't get paid, and that's normally because there's a query on the invoice and we've had to go back to the supplier or the manager, but our intention is to pay on 30-day terms.
Yes, and in terms of cash flow, short-term debtors are 35 million against 59 million short-term creditors. So our cash reserves at 24 million, we have money in hand to access that difference.
Yes, we do. We hold quite a large amount of cash grants that are given to us in advance. So government tend to provide cash up front and for us then to spend against it. So when you look at the reserves, there's 17-18 million pounds of grants in advance. Most of those we hold in cash. And other grants we get from government, they tend to pay up front. So we're always cash positive. So we don't have any cash flow issues.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Good. Nothing else. So the recommendation is that the 22-23 statement of accounts at Appendix 1 be approved. And secondly, the letter of representation be signed. I think it's just signed just by the Chief Finance Officer.
We'll confirm that.
Yes.
Okay. So all those in favour? John, congratulations. So on then to item 10, the internal audit update. Ian, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, quite well, 5 minutes. So this is just to update us on the internal audit programme. And Ian, I hadn't realised you're a kind of statutory appointment, aren't you? Is that right? You know, legislation says we have to have you, and you are therefore kind of an almost independent.
Well, absolutely, Chair. I am very independent of the organisation, and it is a statutory requirement to have internal audit, and it's a code of practice thing that I should deliver an annual internal audit opinion as well. So yeah. We're very much required, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No. Well, it's comforting. It's good. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. So thank you, Chair, and afternoon members. I'm here today to present the update report for Q2, which is item 10. And the purpose of the update is to show our activity throughout the first 2 quarters. And it's also to report outcomes and make you aware of any high risks or significant concerns I may have. So before I just go into the detail report, and I'll keep it short, just to say that members may recall that I spoke about us implementing a new system. We have a new audit management system, and out of any new system, there have been a few bumps in the road, but it's now starting to bear fruit, I think. And I think for an internal audit team to be successful and to enable change, we have to enable that to happen rapidly and quickly so that we can mitigate those risks. And so therefore I'm pleased to report that the report I bring you today contains information that's only 11 days old. So, you know, we're bringing information to you that is very much of the moment. It's not from several quarters ago, so it's of the moment. And I think that will ultimately help us report to officers and members things that are of concern that are of the moment, and that we can put actions in place to make sure that we address those quickly and that those risks no longer are an issue to the council. So I'm pleased to report that. As for this report itself, there are 5 key headlines. The first headline is around audit coverage, and the new thing that we're doing as part of the system. So I'm able to break down coverage in terms of key areas. And for this report, it looks at corporate priorities. There are 3 corporate priorities in there, and it shows it in the graphic on page 217, how that's split down, and an indication of where coverage lies. And for those areas, the corporate priorities, it's good or adequate at the moment, and that's to this point in the year. So as we go on throughout the year, that will mature, and those coverage areas will be, you know, an even better indicator of where we're positioned. Also during the year, I'm going to present some different views. Our system allows us to present different views of coverage, so we'll be able to point you to a view of strategic risks, so how our work is matched to the strategic risks of the council, and service risks, and the healthy organisations, some of the core processes you'd expect to see in there. So there are many views that I'll present throughout the year, but I think overall, in terms of corporate priorities, our coverage is suitable, enable me to form an opinion. The next headline is around activity, and we've undertaken 38 assignments, either complete or in progress at this point in the year. And I think that the level of activity will allow me to deliver the work programme in full by the end of the year. The third headline looks at outcomes, and 92% of our opinion-related work was either reasonable or substantial. So that's very positive. There are no areas of high risk or significant concerns that I want to bring to your attention at this meeting, which is also very positive. The fourth headline is around issues. Again, it's an output from the new system that we're able to analyse issues, to give you underlying trends and patterns. And I think the graphic on page 219 shows issues by root cause. Now, a root cause is the fundamental reason, so it's the underlying reason for an occurrence. So it tries to drill it down into themes rather than being very granular. It looks at the bigger picture. The most common root cause at this point for the year is through the design of kind of policies, processes, and systems. And that being number one root cause is not unexpected given the nature of our work, which is very much around processes, systems and design. But when I look into it a bit further, just to give you some analysis, it points towards areas of maybe non-compliance by services and directorates rather than corporate systems and processes. So it's more around compliance by the user. But again, throughout the year, as that data matures, I'll bring you more information on that. And I guess you may ask, what's the point of this? Well, the point is that it will give us a better focus on where, you know, work should be targeted. And particularly in my case as a head of internal audit, I can make sure that the audit plan addresses those areas of concerns so that we have coverage in those areas. The final headline is around quality. We are quality assessed every 3 years independently by an external body, and when we had a last assessment we were conformant with the standards. They're internal audit standards. Those standards are actually in the process of being rewritten at the moment, so I'll update you on those next year, but we are compliant with the standards in our last assessment. But also we ask each client about our performance, and we send a questionnaire to ask how they score us, and we do that in 5 areas. In terms of scope, professionalism, communication, the added value that we give, and the culture in terms of the way that we audit. And it's early days again, but so far results to date indicate there's a high level of confidence in internal audit and in the work that we do. And with all areas that we look at, we exceed 90%. So where we either met expectation or exceeded expectation. And I think the one area that pleases me most is around the fact that 100% of our clients feel that we add value in the work that we do, which is really important. So just to sum it all up, the overall opinion, and that's an indicative opinion at this stage, is that for Herefordshire Council, we are looking at issuing a reasonable assurance. And that means that generally systems and processes are in place, but there are some areas that require improvement. Thank you, Chair. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for anybody? Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Ian. Thank you very much for the report, and it's very easy. It's good to read. It's well structured, so I really appreciate that. I've got some questions. Firstly, on the root cause, I'm interested in understanding how you incorporate staff turnover and an election year as impactful on things like policies or errors, let's say, caused in policies, processes, and systems. So new people, basically.
Absolutely. When we undertake an audit, we will look at areas like that. We will look at the workforce, the skills, if they're new, if there's turnover. So often recommendations will come out in those areas, and that will be categorised under human factors in this. So you would see areas under human factors.
So that would be the third one down there.
It would be categorised under that. And I think as this database grows, we will be able to drive down into human factors and then pull out more information. At this stage, it's just too early. There's not enough mature information in there. But certainly, I would like to see that as we do that further analysis, real trends will come out that we can pick up on. And I guess it's a pointer for the council, to see whether additional training, if it's those issues, it could be additional training. So we'll just use it to try and build and enable improvement along the way.
Okay, thank you. The other item is on quality assurance, page 220 of my list, and I think that's what page is that of yours? That is page 7 of the report. Yeah, page 7 of your report. There's a nice table there showing percentages of customer satisfaction questionnaire. Could we have another box to show percentage of responses?
I think that's a very perceptive question, and absolutely. I think this for Herefordshire Council, the response rate is pretty good. I think again, it's a new process, so there aren't many in there. We're looking at probably just 10 questionnaires that are driving that at this minute.
Because it's Q2.
Because as this information will mature, and probably I'll show you the picture over 2 years at some point, a rolling 2 years, I would say. But at the moment, we've only got 6 months worth of data in there. So as it's Q2, the next time I see you, there'll be more information in there. And by all means, I'll happily share the information about how many we sent out and what the response rate is, so you can put that into perspective and context a little bit more.
That's right. It's the perspective, because 100% looks very, very, very good, but if it's only 3 people, then yeah, we have to adjust it. Thank you. The other thing was on priorities. I think that was your core priorities or coverage.
Yeah.
Page 228, which is page 13 of your report. I was just wondering how you allocate the priority, and especially I'm looking at on the prioritize, how you prioritize these, and in the waste strategy contract. I feel it would be a higher priority. So can you explain how that priority was allocated?
I can. Many things in the audit world are judgmental, but when we build the plan, which is where this comes from, there is a number of factors that we use as drivers, I guess, and that would be obviously the council's corporate priorities. So we look at the council's corporate plans and the risk registers. We would talk to heads of service and directors to get their priorities. We'd look at what's going on in the bigger world and see where we stand on those. But essentially, this is something that's then scored. So we score that. It have a risk assessment that looks at the big picture, and this is the outcome of that somewhat subjective risk assessment. So, you know, it's my assessment of where we are, but we do keep it up to date. And I think in terms of discussions with officers, and as the risk register changes, then we may go up or down that priority. And I guess if audit committee feel that maybe it's not right in terms of priority, I'd happily receive feedback to say that they felt it should be pushed up the list in terms of where we should focus our audit work.
So you would be reactive to things if there was a cabinet decision that didn't go through or change something, you would reassess the priorities?
These should be reassessed. I can't say they're going to be reassessed. They won't quite be live, but they should be reassessed, you know, at least quarterly.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
So Mark, do you have a request that it's brought up the list or reassessed?
I personally, I just have a feeling that the warning bells go off whenever there's bin men being, you know, threatened, or the bin collection is threatened, let's say, and the impact it's had on other councils, and it's something that I feel that you know, waste services should be a focus, let's say, to make sure it does get completed, because there is I think there's a milestone or there's a deadline approaching for us establishing a new contract. So it just feels like we're at the end of I think is it a 12 or 10-year contract at least, or maybe even longer. So a 24-year contract.
There are various contracts. There's collection of waste,
and there's disposal, and then recycling. Yeah. So, but we're coming to the end of a long contract, and whenever we come to the end of a big contract, I think that entitles it to be raised up in the priority.
Chair, could I suggest that obviously go away and talk to officers, and I'm happy to reassess some of those things along that particular line, and then report back to next committee to tell you whether I still feel, and give you some justification about where it's positioned, and maybe tell you if we're going to move it up or move it down, or keep it where it is.
That'd be great. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And any?
Yeah. Yes. Under deferred audits, an interesting item. Proactive fraud work tax evasion, temporarily deferred, as HMRC are currently carrying out their own review of the council for tax evasion, or just a normal review.
So that's a routine compliance check by HMRC, and that's currently underway and concluding. So I think the internal audit piece was deferred because it was duplication of efforts in the same area, and I think the work of HMRC will be presented to you, and that can inform your opinion on that matter.
Yes, so we are at risk of tax evasion.
No, and I think the wording of that is potentially misleading. It's a compliance check of our the way that we account, and the transactions that might incur tax.
Okay.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks Ian for the report. Clear to me. This may be totally the wrong time to bring it up, but would you consider in the future looking at aspects of the planning regime, particularly Section 106? Or have you got an intention to look at that in the next year or so already?
We have done some work on planning 106 agreements. So I'll happily share with committee the work that we've done.
That'll be good. I mean, my concern is that the last time members had an update, the county council had around £13 million in Section 106 receipts. So basically, that is £13 million which has not been spent in delivering road improvements, playgrounds, and all the rest of it in the county. And of course, one of the issues there to me, one of the financial risks, is that with current levels of inflation, if you sign an agreement in 2017, and in that agreement you have £60,000 allocated for a pedestrian crossing, by the time you get to 2023, 6 years on, you don't actually have the money in there. The £60,000 isn't going to pay for a level crossing. So that's an issue to me. That's an issue of not being able to deliver infrastructure benefits for the people of Herefordshire. So I'm happy to email you and have a separate conversation outside this committee about that and give you any further information about my concerns, if that would interest you.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Okay.
I'm more than happy to receive any feedback from any member of the committee. Again, it just helps to feed our risk profiling, you know, and so local information is good information, isn't it? So
I would also be very interested to hear about that.
Well, you're going to be part of it.
Exactly.
Andrew, I don't wish to blow the trumpet of the previous administration, but we did try to push this along quite.
Well, as I said,
I wonder whether you.
Cabinet have looked at this twice. There have been 2 papers where Cabinet have received a report about the amount of money that is held and a proposal of a way forward of how to deal with it. So I'll make sure that those reports are shared with you, because Cabinet are taking a very active interest in those. Before the election, there were 2 papers that were brought to Cabinet with a way forward. So I'll share those with as background information.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. This takes quite some time for these things, but you were always encouraging us to, you know, we want to spend this money. I think as far as actually you personally were saying we need to spend it.
Well, I had a conversation with the PMO officers who are leading that this morning, and they're well underway with getting this money spent. There are some challenges, as Councillor Buckram said, about some of these are a fixed sum, and that some of them have an inflation clause, so every sectional agreement is different. But we're very keen to get the money spent and spent well.
Can I make some perhaps general comments here? So, there are some key risk areas in the council. One is children's services. So I look in the schedule to see what work internal audit is doing about, you know, putting its eyes on that, and I don't really see very much. So this is a key area of risk in the council. So are you able to explain to me why it's not a focus of your work, please?
I think that's a good point, Chair. In terms of internal audits work, we take assurance from many different providers. I think in the children's services case, clearly there is a lot of there's a big inspection regime that's already ongoing in those areas. So clearly I will take my assurance from that. But also we are meeting with Darryl, and we will be putting some work in that will align to his vision and the goals that they have. But at this stage, I think, you know, it's important that they focus on the issues that have already been identified in the previous inspection regimes that they've had. And so we will go along and try and help support that, but it will be a secondary part of that at this stage, I would say.
The committee satisfied with that explanation? Do we want any follow-up with it? No? Yeah. So I think probably, you know, if you could sort of highlight where you are, because it's such a big issue for me. The second is a little bit more difficult, really. It's the whole issue of the River Wye and phosphates and the effect on the local economy with tourism, and it's not necessarily a council issue, although it has an impact on the revenue which we receive, the economic in terms of not housing not being built so quickly. So again, for me, it's a big issue, a big risk issue for the county as a whole. It affects businesses, and again, I wonder, you know, I don't see anything on that. And you might say to me, well, nothing needs to be in there anyway, but just an observation here about it. To me, again, it's a big risk issue.
It is a big risk issue, and in fact, it's on many authorities' corporate risk registers, the phosphates issue. It's not on the plan because you know, we've not assessed that as being an area that's particularly easily auditable, and that probably we feel that there are other areas that we would get more benefit out of by looking at those with an internal audit eye. I'm not saying we would never look at it, but it is on our radar. If you look at our SWOP top 10 risks across local authorities, it is on there, the nature emergency type scenarios. Again, I'm more than happy to get feedback if we think it should, but it's not something that's at this minute jumping out as an area of activity that I would consider in this year's plan. But you might find that it cascades into the new plan in the future.
And I think as a council, we've done some great things. I think the phosphate credits and all that sort. So planning has started to start working in the northern part of the county. So I feel we've done some good things, but that doesn't mean to say we can't do anything better and having another eye look at it. So I think, Ian, that's a helpful response. And interesting to know it's on the risk register of a lot of other counties as well. The third area for me, which is a really big issue, is long-term financial stability. It's a risk which we can't ignore. It's really very much in the public domain. And again, I just wonder what your thought. That must be on everybody's risk register as well. And again, where does internal audit? What is it doing? Is it doing lots of things which I just can't see? That is it embedding everything anyway? Just appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite correct in that. It's very high up on the agenda of most local authorities at the moment. Clearly, in terms of where we're positioned as internal auditors. We look at some of the fundamental underlying processes that build resilience in terms of the financial position, like the budgetary control processes, all your systems like your payroll systems, your payment systems, your collection of income systems. And all of those build a picture of that and contribute to the financial resilience. Things like your longer term and your medium term financial planning, and your capital accounting, they should also be part of that rolling programme. So they will certainly feature. You may not see them on there yet because we don't give you all of the things that we're going to do, but they will feed in. So certainly, your medium term and long term financial planning will be part of the internal audit process in future years.
Thank you. And my last one is about the PMO. A bit of my experience is that big issues, you think you've solved them, and then 4 or 5 years down the line they come back and hit you. And there's some suggestion with the PMO, it slows decision making up. It may or may not be, but that would be a kind of risk that I'd see, and almost a fresh look. How is it going? Just is it too early to do that kind of thing? But I don't want the sort of PMO approach to disappear from the radar, because we're all very happy with the way it's going. I'd almost like someone to go in and give us some confirmation, it's going really, really well. I think this bit needs tweaking. Again, I'm just concerned down the line there might be issues. At the moment it seems to be working well, giving us a lot of comfort about control over cost and that kind of thing.
I think PMO, you've done some small pieces of work that have involved PMO, and we're fairly comfortable with the process that they go through, and the outputs. There are still improvements to be made, no doubt, in some areas, but generally I'm confident in the way that those processes are working. But again, it's probably an area that does need. It's a support service, and so when we look at other aspects and other projects, PMO is often a little part of that, and so maybe you don't see it in the plan because it's not specifically called PMO, but as we look at projects and as we look at initiatives, it's part of that, the delivery of that, and so maybe it's something I can do to pull out those areas of PMO, and I'll see what's in our system and see if I can pull out specific issues or coverage that relates to PMO, so maybe that will give you a bit more assurance. But at this present, I've got no concerns.
No, okay.
Chair.
Yeah, Frank.
You've used the acronym, and
PMO, apparently.
which I'd already forgotten since you mentioned it. So for the benefit of anybody watching this that doesn't know what PMO stands for, could you remind us, please?
Project Management Office.
Thank you.
So it's people there who, you know, this is the project you need to deliver,
Yeah.
and they make sure it's delivered over a period of time. That Gantt, well, Gantt chart,
Not
Gantt probably stands for something, doesn't it, as well?
Yes, we're not allowed to use acronyms unless we say what they are.
So in thanks for that, those sort of general picture things. I've got some specific ones here.
Sorry, I didn't know.
So planning enforcement, this is future proposed. So Councillor Bartlett's mentioned concern about that. That's shown here as low priority. I think from a local political, you know, I think ward councillors it's a significant issue. So rather than being low priority, if you could raise that, I think the sooner have a look at that, we'd appreciate that. We mentioned about the waste. Were there some which we think might be useful for you to come, because I'm not sure how you presume if there's an important one in your view, that's why we hear of it here.
If I have issues, I will certainly make you aware of it.
But there might be others which we think, oh, that looks rather interesting. We'd like a little bit of like that report to come to us as well. And I think the planning enforcement would be one within that sort of category. Were there any others that any members of the committee would like to consider more urgently or be taken to have a look at by this committee? I think we can just look at it the next time we have this review and see if there are any others.
Thank you. I've mentioned the one about waste contractor.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, we've got the whistleblowing one next, which is an example.
Yeah. Well, there is one issue that is going to come up that which is going to make inroads on our financial resilience, is that homelessness is going to increase substantially. And this has had a devastating effect on some councils. Because they have to provide for those made homeless to being chucked out of their rental properties and on payment of rent, etc., etc. I don't know whether you can audit that at this point, but I don't think at this moment it's affecting us, but I'm sure it will over this next 12 months. Yeah.
Andrew,
and I think that it's a very valid point, and it's one of the challenges the council face, but I think that's more of an area for the Scrutiny Management Board. Cabinet recently asked Scrutiny Management Board to look at our budget position and future forecasts, so I think that would be a really good item for the Scrutiny Management Board to ask those appropriate questions to understand how council is at the moment, what our future projections, how it's impacting on our budget. So it's a very valid point.
Jen, could you minute that and pass that on to the Scrutiny Management Board? Thank you. Is it Hastings Council have been in the news about that, saying that their costs have gone up a huge amount with people were transferring people out of London down to Hastings? Yeah. Tempted to say Hereford's a much more attractive place, but I might just encourage people to come here. So item 10, I'll move to the recommendation, if that's all right with everybody. So recommendation is that we review the activity and concerns, and we are satisfied, subject to various comments that have been made with what there is, and we note the report and the assurances and recommendations which the report makes. We've commented on as necessary. Everybody happy with that? All in favour? Thank you very much. Item 11, whistleblowing. Sean.
Thank you, Chair.
Committee remember that you approved a new whistleblowing policy and procedure back in June, and part of that I mentioned that we were being audited by our internal audit, and you requested a report on that audit. So this report is a summary of those audit findings. So the audit was focused on 5 elements, which is in paragraph 4 of the report. When I heard about we having an audit, there was some trepidation by myself, because obviously this related to a time before I joined the authority, and we've had quite a churn of staff. But the outcome from the audit opinion, the assurance opinion, was that it was reasonable. So I felt that was reasonable, and that was good. So there were 4 findings during the audit, and they are recorded in paragraph 6 of the report. I was happy to say that they were relatively straightforward for us to mitigate, and we did that during the audit. So I don't know if Ian has any comments he wants to make on the assurance.
I'm happy to make a quick comment. Yeah. I think, as you say, there are 4 findings there. None of them were particularly deal breakers, certainly. But I think the most positive thing is that we, throughout the journey, we could see the improvement. So we saw the pre-audit times, but we could see that during the course of the audit, the new policy, that things were changing. The way that whistleblowing complaints were recorded was improving, and so I think this audit records a positive journey. And so at the end of it, we only found 4 fairly minor recommendations.
I mean, it's frightfully difficult to measure the success or otherwise of a policy, because success is if you have lots of complaints, lots of reports, you'd say, well, that's really good. But on the other hand, if you have very few, it's also very good, depending on which way you look at it. And Ian, I mean, you were looking at the process, so it's very difficult for you to come up with a statement and say, oh yes, the whistleblowing policy is working, and people who have concerns are raising them. I'm not sure you're only looking at the processes rather than the cultural change. I'd rather you said, yes, you can look at the cultural change, but it's just not possible, is it really?
I think you can look at culture, the bigger picture of culture in an authority, and I suspect we'll be doing some work on the culture of the authority. But this audit was about the whistleblowing process, and was the policy fit for purpose, and were the mechanisms that you would collect those whistleblowing complaints in, and I suppose around the awareness. So do people know that policy exists, and do they feel confident? And that's where culture comes in, doesn't it? That's the more difficult thing to measure. Do members of staff feel that the culture is okay, that they can make whistleblowing complaints? That's much harder to measure. And I guess over time, maybe the number of complaints is the indicator about the culture to a certain degree. But when we did the audit,
which way is helpful?
My opinion would be that clearly there's no such thing as a bad complaint. It would have something in it, and but I guess it's maybe if there's such thing as benchmarking that might help you in this area. But certainly, I'd much rather see more significant complaints than no complaints at all, because that would help help the authority.
And actually, but you need the building blocks, basically, don't you? You need the processes in place before you can even make a change. So this is the start, really, hopefully, of a bit of a journey. Anybody? I think Mark, you were going to ask.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got some conflicting questions actually that seem to oppose themselves. So there's the issue about protecting anonymity, and that it can be awkward to implement, but I understand that not much you can do about that. But can a monitoring officer review the history? Because you said there's something about historical records not being kept appropriately, but are monitoring officers allowed to look at a current case and then cross-reference it to historical cases to see whether there's been a recurrence from a similar issue, and therefore that might lend weight, or aren't you allowed to do that as part of the policy?
Carry on.
Certainly from my perspective, I think the point of collecting this data and reporting this data is to look for trends, to see where issues arise, see if we can see common threads, common problems, or bad or good or bad practice. So we will be looking across the piece, so to speak, in relation to these complaints, and trying, and if there are common themes, then reporting them back to yourselves and through to the officers, because obviously if there is an issue which, for example, if we saw there was a problem with, say, how the grievance policy was working, now individually, each officer in each department would be looking at separately and think, well, it's just an issue for myself. But us looking at that, we could actually see, well, actually, this is a recurrent theme. It's not unique to one part of the council, so we need to do something about that. So we would then report that back to the HR department. So it wouldn't just be the officers impacted by that particular complaint. So, but this is the start of the journey, because as was picked up in the audit, some of the data we collected previously wasn't complete, but we've now revisited that, and we've got a better means of recording this. So when we start bringing this to you in our yearly report, which will be in July time, you'll have fuller data, and we will categorise that so you can see where the issues are. Obviously, we won't be able to give the full details behind that, but we will categorise it, by type of complaint and the nature of that. So I'm sure if you're going down the list and you see a common thread, you're probably going to be asking, well, actually, what's been done about this?
Yeah, and I can see how that would be useful within the context of Herefordshire Council, but is there a trend that looks across councils? Because I'm thinking that councillors or civil servants or whoever, they move between different councils, and we've got directors who come from different councils, and they may have whistleblowing policies, but there's no way we can look at those. So the thing is, I suppose what set off the bells in my head were the stories about, police officers who have gone from different groups, different police areas, and they've had a record and it hasn't gone with them. So are we using this whistleblowing policy in any way to provide protection to the people who are here, or is that not allowed? I'm just not sure about what is permitted and what isn't permitted.
I don't think the process itself, the parts that we're involved pick up on that. But for example, if someone in relation to a professional officer,
like fraud, for example,
a professional officer, that type of thing, then there will be action from that. We're reporting it to the police, reporting it to the professional body, and something would happen from that. So we would record that, but there wouldn't be a sharing between authorities.
Okay. No, understood. All right, so it would be, because you would implement it, you'd actually call in outside agencies, they'd know. Okay,
that's right. That's got it.
Thank you. And then conversely, then this is where I said I've been sort of countering my argument. Is there if it's determined that a whistleblowing was unjustified, there was no cause for it, is a person allowed to ask for it to be deleted, to be removed?
It would depend on the nature of the complaint. For example, if it was something that we thought was a vexatious complaint, it wasn't a whistleblowing complaint, it actually came out to be someone unnecessarily raising a grievance, then it wouldn't be the case of, well, the whistleblowing wasn't upheld, we forget about this. Obviously the actions have consequences, and if someone had raised something unjustifiably, then as a manager, you would need to do something about that, especially if you're the person being complained about and you felt it was it shouldn't have been
defamation
raised.
In a way.
Yeah, that's it. But we don't. we keep things anonymous. As soon as the complaint is resolved, we delete the data. We track the records, so we track the trends, etc. But once it's been resolved, we remove the information. It's all kept securely, and then we delete that after 12 months.
Oh, right. Okay.
But we do track we keep hold of the records of the nature of the complaint, the nature of the outcome.
That's where the conflict came in. I was trying to understand, how do you keep a trend and also preserve anonymity? And yeah.
But we just have these categories. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet with all different categories of data, timings, additional information of when it came in, how long it took us to process it, that type of thing. So so that will be in the report that will come to you in around the nearest meeting to July.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
In terms of complaints, what's the timeline? How quickly do you think they should be dealt with? And can they drag on for any reason? Or?
They can, and because the nature of the complaint isn't actually investigated by legal services, we keep an oversight on that. So, for example, if it's a complaint about a service area, then it's that service area that will do the investigation. So we keep a control over we may maintain a barrier between the complainant and the service area if they want to remain anonymous, but we then ensure that there is traction, it is work, there is movement, and it's not the service area hasn't just ignored us, and that there is an actual outcome at the end. The timescales, unfortunately, how long is a piece of string with some things? The assurance I can give you is that we do keep on top of the service areas, and we do look for updates. And if we don't receive an update, we escalate it straight away. But generally, touch wood, the service areas take it seriously, and they prioritise it.
Right.
But the timescale is depending on the nature of the complaint and the number of people involved.
There is an oversight of how it's being dealt with, and
that's where we come into it. Yes.
A severe prodding if it's been delayed. Yes.
That's it. That's right.
Thank you, Sean. We'll move on. Yep. So the recommendation is that we note the findings, and we note the changes in operation and reporting underpinning the whistleblowing policy. All those in favour? Thank you. So just 2 items. I think we can keep going rather than having a break. So in here, changes to fees and charges. Sean, that's yours again.
Thank you, Chair. So the request in the committee is to agree a change to the Constitution to allow a common charging policy and basis for fees and charges. And the second point is authorisation for officers to make changes to fees and charges within a year. So that's the 2 points what we're asking for. If I can draw your attention to paragraph 9, 244 and 245. So this is the italicised wording in the report. That is the wording that we're asking to be inserted into the Constitution. So if we take in the policy basis first, currently what's in the Constitution doesn't really assist officers how to set charges, what they take into consideration when determining what a charge should be. So the wording from the paragraphs A to L in part 9, none of that is my work. That is the work from Cabinet and officers and other committees in 2011. So there was a Cabinet report that said that was the basis of charging. And when I read through it, I couldn't fault it. I thought it was very good. It took into consideration all what we as a council committee or an individual officer should be considering when looking at fees and charges. So when we talk about fees and charges, we're not just talking about increases, we're also talking about decreases, introducing a new charge, removing a charge, that type of thing. So at the moment, the Constitution doesn't give any guidance, and I would hope that you could support inserting those A to L, so it gives a good basis as was decided in 2011, for the introduction of fees and charges. The second part of the recommendation is to allow officers to make charges within a year. This is intended to be incidental charges. So as we know, that there is a budget setting process which starts off in October. That ends with the budget being set in February each year. That is set by members, by full council. Part of that is the fees and charges. So the members set the majority of the fees and charges. This is just asking for a permission to make amendment. I want to keep it. I want to say incidental or minor, but I think that would be kind of understating it somewhat. So incidental changes. So what I've seen in other, not all councils, but the ones that I'm familiar with, this is in the constitution, and they have two ways of kind of controlling this. So the members get assurance by one of two ways. Either by setting a limit, by saying, well, you can only do a percentage or an amount, or the second way is a process. And that process is what we're recommending here. So the first part of the changes are that the officers can make recommendations for changing fees and charges, provided that they consult with the lead member, the chief finance officer, and the group leaders. And then after that, if they decide to make that change, then those same parties are all notified of that change. So everybody is aware, everyone's fully aware of what the changes are, and the normal constitutional controls then kick in if members disagree with the changes. So if it is an executive function type decision, you have the call-in power, etc. So Chair, so happy to take any comments or questions on that.
Right. Well, can I ask you please, Sean, could you give me one example of something that might fall into this? Just a typical example.
The costs of registration fees, so with the registrars, costs of parking fees, those type of things. So if there, for example, the purpose of this is so we can respond back to changes. So it's, the budget is set in February time, and hopefully that should be enough. But especially with the high inflation rates, as soon as we set the budget, we didn't know what the inflation rate is going to be, and it's to enable us to respond. Let's respond to that. Another example I could use, if we introduce a new service, with a charge that goes with that, and it's not in the current approved budget, so it would allow officers to make what would probably be quite a modest change without having to go back to full council or to the relevant committee or member.
And are you quite generous, Sean? And reasonable?
I think that's part of A to L, yes, of all the points that we to take into consideration when setting the fees.
Yeah, Mark.
Thank you, Chair.
I take it nobody's ever recommended reducing a fee. Not lately, is it?
It does happen quite a lot. If you, for example, if you wanted to encourage the use of a particular service, I'm thinking about sports centres, that type of thing. If the use is falling down, then we might agree that the cost of that could be reduced to encourage people to take that up.
Yeah.
Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. I've got a question about notification.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, when we have to approve things, we have to physically be in the room and raise our hand.
Yes.
So that's our notification in a way of something we vote on it. How do you see notification working then? If somebody wants to increase a fee or a charge, you said they notify the managers, they notify the stakeholders,
yes,
who are impacted on that. So first of all, they have to know who all the stakeholders are, right? And secondly, they need to know that those stakeholders have responded in some way, because if it hits your email inbox and it sits there for a few weeks and you say, yeah, I've read it, but you don't tell anybody,
mm-hmm.
how's the process actually going to work? That notification and validation going to work?
I think that's the difference between a consultation. I consult with someone as opposed to what you are doing here, which is making a decision. So you have to be here to make a decision. The way that we've drafted it, it's incumbent upon the director to ensure that they're happy with the consultation that they've undertaken. So we haven't specified you must send this to this person, you must wait, you must positively get a response, that type of thing. Because if we did that and someone disagreed with it, well, actually, that person is making the decision. So if for example, if the consultation was you have to respond to me and you don't, you've effectively blocked that decision. So we've left it that the duty is on the director to consult. And as with every other consultation, it has to be meaningful. They have to make sure they're done at the appropriate time, the appropriate method. But you're right. If someone if I consult with you and you ignore me, at some point I would then have to go. Well, I have to make this decision. I've consulted. I've taken no response as being you don't have any issue for that.
But that response is probably going to be an email. It's probably that's the most likely notification method that's going to be used.
Yes. And for example, with this report, we did consult with the group leaders beforehand, because we have a process where any changes to the constitutions, we do seek their views before we brought it to you. We had one group leader came back with comments which we've incorporated into the recommendation, and the others didn't. Probably because they agreed to it, didn't need to comment on that. So, or because they were in agreement, or they thought it was a good idea. Hopefully.
Yes, it's an awkward one. That. We always get those abilities on emails, you know, you can see whether somebody's read it or they've received it or they can flag it or something. But no, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And the control's still there after the decision is made. So the decision will be notified, and depending on the amount, it will be through the Register of Officer decisions, or if it's below that figure, we said there has to be a second notification if it's below, for example, a 50,000 figure there. And then obviously the member could then, there are options for the member in relation to, if you're still unhappy with the decision, you can call matters in, that type of thing. So it's not the you missed it once and that's it, so to speak. There are still opportunities to have a say in that.
Okay. Yeah.
Sean, I must confess, I had thought that inflationary increases would also have to go to group leaders, but really the page 245. So it says where a change is proposed to apply the director brackets other than an inflationary increase, then certain people must be consulted, which suggests that if it's inflationary, then no such consultation is necessary.
That was intended, but this is my recommendation, Chair. So if you're saying, well, actually inflationary trip, but that means you would be consulted on everything if there's a inflationary increase. Well,
I was just thinking something like car parking charges. If inflation is 20%, then if the director just can decide that it's a 20% increase, then I'm not sure that's not what I thought.
Okay. If the committee wants to remove that.
Well, I just raised the point. So
I was just thinking we should put Stockton in the centre of Hereford if they went up by 20%.
But I don't know. Do you think that officers should be? So this proposal is that officers can increase up to inflation without.
Yeah.
And is that how it's being presented to the group leaders as well?
Yes. That's. But if you want to remove, the intention behind this is within year changes.
Yeah.
So I see where you're coming from. Logically, there should be an inflation increase in there in any event in the budget at the start of the year. So
you're giving me too much credit, I think.
So this change is there's a higher inflationary rate. So if personally, I don't have any issues with removing the other than inflationary increases, because that fits more with the purpose of this.
Okay, is that all right?
Presumably, Mr. Chairman, this goes to the director and it goes to the cabinet member as well.
Yeah, so it was when it went to the group leaders, the group leaders thought it should actually go to the group leaders as well as. So if it just goes to the cabinet member, then they can make the decision without referring to anybody else. And I think the group leaders agreed it should go to group leaders. Rather than all, it's a compromise to all members.
It sounds like a few more group leaders ought to have responded then.
Well, that's a matter for them, I suppose. But I would rather we took the words.
What you're saying, Chair, is actually more logical, because as I've said at the start, the budget is set by the members in February time, which should already have an inflationary increase there. So this is only talking about extraordinary changes up or down within the year. So I think you're right on that. That should come out. So I'm happy to remove that if the committee wants that.
Yeah, I think you could put like a footnote saying we've taken into consideration that inflation increases will be applied, will have been applied.
Already been applied, yes, and we'll strike the other than inflationary increase from that part.
Thank you. So the recommendation is that we note the the changes in paragraph 9 are approved. Subject that one amendment to enable in-year changes to be made by directors in consultation with the Chief Financial Officer and relevant members, and the monitoring officer is authorised to amend the financial procedure rules and financial guidance of the Constitution to reflect this recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. Finally, the work programme. Jen, you have kindly provided us with an amended programme.
Yes, condensed.
So it shows that the next meeting we deal with internal audit again, external audit, or anti-fraud, bribery policy, energy and waste loan update. So information access. Then we've got items for January now. That the risk registers approach to strategic risk management update was due to be in the November meeting, but I understand that's not advanced enough to take place November, so we've been asked to postpone it to January. I don't know, Rachel or Andrew, do you have a comment on that at all? It's slipped a couple of times. If we want to.
Well, you may want to give the lead officer a very clear steer that it has to come to that meeting. Maybe helpful just to clarify.
We like to do it, it is a long stop date, that's what we'd have to do. I don't know which corporate director comes under Ross.
No, it's Amy Pitt, who is the corporate strategy.
But she reports to
Paul,
okay. So if we could minute that. Is there anything else anybody wanted to comment on the work programme? I think it's quite balanced, Jenny.
Yeah, I think we're quite happy with what we're doing.
And that will take us through till May. Year of meetings.
Yeah, wonderful.
Good. The resolution work programme is just, so the work programme is now agreed. Date of next meeting. Is there anything else I need to mention, Jen?
It's about the skills matrix.
Skills, thank you very much. Yes, so as part for the recruiting an independent member, first step is to find out which area we need to cover particularly. It affects the job description, find out where there are gaps. So you've been sent a matrix. It's quite long. But I really appreciate it if you could return it by the end of the month.
What, this month?
It's very good. Yes, yes.
Month breaks a year.
Well, it's going to hold up the process if we haven't got it today. So if you could, if you might want to have 2 bites of the cherry or something like that to get it done. They can be set here. Put it as a Word document and save it. Put the numbers in, or you can even write, if it's easier, print it out, write the numbers, write the scores in, and Jen will then convert them into stuff. So, end of the month. I'm not quite sure what the repercussions would be, but a bit like the auditors being late, really, isn't it? Do about it.
Does Sean need to introduce a penalty for any of us that have failed to achieve?
You'll just need training.
Penalty is to eat 2 packets of Frank's biscuits. Okay, so forward recorded with posterity. Embarrassing. So I'll draw the meeting to a close. Can we allow the live stream be stopped, please?